The gates of Astoria Prime Academy were made of crystal that shone like frozen starlight. They had stood for 200 years, watching the children of the most powerful families in the galaxy walk through them. Senators' daughters, corporate heirs, princes from distant worlds. Every student who passed through those gates carried a name that meant something, a history that could be traced back for generations. On that cold September morning, a girl walked through the gates carrying only a small silver case. She wore the standard academy uniform, but something about her seemed different. She moved like someone who had learned to be invisible. Her dark hair was pulled back simply. Her eyes watched everything but gave away nothing. No parent stood behind her waving goodbye. No expensive shuttle waited nearby in case she changed her mind. She was completely alone. The registrar was a thin man named Mr. Carver who had processed thousands of students over his 30 years at the academy. He had seen nervous children and arrogant ones. He had dealt with crying mothers and demanding fathers. But he had never seen anything like what happened when he scanned this girl's credentials. The terminal screen flickered. Then it went completely dark. For 3 long seconds, every system in the registration office shut down. When the power returned, Mr. Carver's hands were shaking. "There seems to be a problem," he said slowly. The girl looked at him with calm eyes. "Is there?" Her documents appeared perfect. The academy seal was correct. The authorization codes were valid. Her tuition had been paid in full through a transfer that came from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. But when Mr. Carver tried to verify her background, every database gave him the same answer: no prior record found. She said her name was. She answered every question politely but briefly. When asked about her family, she said they were gone. When asked about her previous education, she said she had been homeschooled. When asked for references, she provided names that checked out but led to people who seemed to know very little about her. The administration held emergency meetings. They contacted the Galactic Education Authority. They ran her genetic scan through every family registry in the known systems. Nothing matched. This girl did not exist in any record anywhere. But her paperwork was flawless. Her test scores were exceptional. And someone very important had clearly wanted her here, because every attempt to reject her application was quietly blocked from higher up. So became a student at Astoria Prime Academy, and the whispers began immediately. The other students noticed her on the first day. In a school where everyone knew everyone's family tree going back 10 generations, a stranger stood out like a black hole in a field of stars. They watched her walk through the marble corridors with her head held high. They saw how she sat alone in the dining hall, eating slowly and observing everything around her. The theory started before the first week was over. Some students said she was a government experiment, a genetically engineered soldier sent to spy on the powerful families. Others claimed she was the secret daughter of a fallen dynasty, hidden away since birth to protect her from enemies. A few whispered that she was not human at all, but some kind of advanced artificial being designed to pass as a student. Heard the whispers. She never responded to them. She simply went to her classes, completed her assignments, and returned to her small single room in the dormitory. She made no effort to make friends. She asked no one for help. She existed in her own quiet bubble while the rest of the academy buzzed with curiosity about her. 3 weeks into the semester, everything changed. The advanced navigation class was known as the hardest course at the academy. Students trained for years before attempting its final simulation, the famous corridor run. The test recreated the most dangerous navigation route in the galaxy, a twisting path through asteroid fields and gravity wells that had killed hundreds of real pilots. The academy record for completing it was held by the son of an admiral who had trained since childhood. He had finished in 22 minutes and 14 seconds. Completed it in 18 minutes and 3 seconds. The instructor, a retired captain named, stood frozen at his console as the simulation ended. The other students sat in stunned silence. What they had just witnessed was supposed to be impossible. "Where did you train?" Captain demanded. His voice was rough with shock. Removed her navigation headset calmly. "I taught myself," she said. "That's not possible. No one teaches themselves to fly like that." "I did." She offered no other explanation. Captain reported the incident to the Academy director. The director added it to the growing file on the mysterious, a file that was becoming thicker every week. The founding families heard about the navigation test within hours. These were the 12 most powerful dynasties in the galaxy, and their children formed an unofficial ruling class within the Academy. They met that night in a private study room that their parents had used a generation before. "She's a threat," said, whose family controlled half the shipping lanes in the outer systems. "If we can't verify who she is, she shouldn't be here among us." "Then let's verify her," said. Her family owned the largest media corporation in 3 sectors. "We have resources. We can find out anything about anyone." They pooled their connections. They hired investigators that governments used for their most sensitive cases. They called in favors from intelligence agencies and corporate security divisions. They were the children of power, and they used that power to dig into his past. What they found terrified them. Every trail led nowhere. Every lead ended at locked doors and classified files. Not just hidden information, but actively protected information. Someone powerful did not want his identity discovered. Someone with enough authority to block the founding families themselves. The students grew afraid. They were used to being the hunters, not the hunted. They were used to knowing everything about everyone. Represented something they had never faced before, a mystery they could not solve. On the night before winter break, sat alone in her room when her personal terminal received a message. It came through a frequency that should not have existed within Academy walls, a communication channel that bypassed every security system. She read the message once. Her face showed no emotion. She deleted it immediately. Then she walked through empty corridors to the observation deck that looked out over the Academy's private nebula. The swirling clouds of gas and dust glowed purple and gold against the darkness of space. She stood at the window for a long time, looking at nothing and everything. When she turned around, was standing there. Behind him stood the heirs of the other founding families, their faces hard with suspicion and fear. "We know you're not who you claim to be," said. Studied him with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than 18. She did not look afraid. She did not look surprised. She looked like someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "No," she replied quietly. "I'm exactly who I need to be. The question is whether any of you are ready to learn why I'm really here." The nebula swirled silently behind her. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance, and smiled like someone who already knew how the story would end. The winter break lasted 3 weeks. Most students flew home to their family estates on distant planets. The Academy grew quiet and empty, but stayed behind. She had nowhere else to go, or at least that was what she told the staff who asked. The security guards noticed something strange. Their cameras showed leaving the Academy grounds 3 times during the break, always at night, always alone. She walked past the gates and disappeared into the darkness. Hours later, she would return just before dawn. The sensors on her uniform detected traces of atmospheric compounds that did not exist on this moon. Where was she going? How was she getting there? No one could answer these questions. When the new semester began, the founding families continued their investigation. But something had changed. The private investigators they hired started quitting. One by one, they sent back their fees and refused to continue. 2 of them disappeared completely. One old detective, a man who had solved cases for planetary governments, returned his payment with a handwritten note that contained only 2 words: "Stop looking." The children of power were not used to being told no. They pushed harder, and that was when the galaxy began to fall apart around them. A diplomatic crisis exploded across 3 star systems. Old alliances broke. Trade routes that had operated for centuries suddenly closed. Ships carrying food and medicine were turned away at borders. War seemed closer than it had been in 50 years. The academy continued its classes, but everyone felt the tension. Parents sent worried messages. News feeds played constantly in common rooms, and buried in the classified briefings that filtered down to the elite students was a single name. Not just. It appeared in connection with secret peace negotiations happening far from public view. The name was mentioned and then quickly hidden again, as if someone had made a mistake by including it. Searched the historical databases for hours. He found almost nothing. The family had been erased from official records 40 years ago. There were hints of a tragedy, a catastrophe, something terrible that had happened. But the details were gone, wiped clean as if they had never existed. Meanwhile, a quiet girl named Sara had been watching more carefully than anyone else. Sara was the daughter of a minor diplomatic family, not important enough to join the founding family circle, but observant enough to notice things others missed. She had seen how knew her way around the academy before anyone showed her. She had watched correct a history professor about a battle that happened 200 years ago, providing details that were not in any textbook. She had noticed how sometimes stopped walking suddenly, her head tilted, listening to sounds that no one else could hear. One night, Sora found alone in the library. "You've been here before," Sora said softly. "Haven't you? Not just this semester, before that, a long time ago." Was silent for a long moment. Her fingers traced the edge of an old book. When she finally spoke, her voice was tired. "Not me," said, "but yes, someone very much like me." She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was old and worn, printed on actual paper instead of displayed on a screen. The image showed Astoria Prime Academy 40 years earlier. A class of graduating students stood in neat rows, wearing formal uniforms and proud smiles. Sara looked at the front row, her breath caught in her throat. Standing there third from the left was a young woman who looked exactly like, the same dark hair, the same calm eyes, the same quiet strength in her posture. "That's my mother," said. "She graduated the year before my family was destroyed." The truth came out slowly, piece by piece. The family had not been one of the 12 founding families. They had been the 13th, the hidden one, the balancing force that was supposed to keep the others from becoming too powerful or too corrupt. For generations, they had worked in the shadows. They had prevented wars. They had stopped monopolies. They had protected ordinary people from the greed of the powerful. But 40 years ago, the 12 families had decided they no longer wanted to be balanced. They wanted absolute control. They had destroyed the family in a single night, assassins and bombs and lies. The survivors scattered across the galaxy, hiding in remote places where no one would find them. Their records were erased. Their name was forbidden. They became ghosts. But ghosts can have children. Had been raised in secret. She had trained in hidden academies on planets that officially did not exist. She had learned everything her mother had known and more. And she had been prepared for one purpose: to return to Astoria Prime and finish what her family had started. The current diplomatic crisis was not random. It had been engineered by the founding families to grab more power while the galaxy was distracted. Had proof, documents, recordings, evidence that showed exactly how the 12 families had manipulated governments and markets for decades. The confrontation came on a spring evening. The heirs of the founding families surrounded in the great hall of the academy. They had brought security guards loyal to their parents. They believed they had won. "Destroy the evidence," demanded. "Disappear and we'll let you live." Looked at the circle of hostile faces around her. She did not seem afraid. She seemed almost sad. "You still don't understand," she said. "I didn't come here to threaten you. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here to save you from yourselves." She raised her hand. Around the great hall, screens flickered to life. Not just the Academy screens, but screens across the galaxy. News networks, government channels, independent archives. Every broadcasting system that could receive a signal was now showing the same thing. The evidence was transmitting live. Every secret deal, every hidden crime, every lie the founding families had told for 40 years. It was spreading across the stars faster than anyone could stop it. "My family believed this academy should train leaders who serve the galaxy," said. Her voice was calm and clear. "Not dynasties that devour it. That's why I'm really here. Not for revenge, for reform." 3 of the 12 founding families fell in the scandal that followed. Their leaders faced trials. Their assets were frozen. The Academy's charter was rewritten to welcome students from all backgrounds, not just the powerful elite. Graduated 2 years later, she stood first in her class, and the ceremony was broadcast across 100 worlds. The girl who had arrived as a mystery left as a symbol. Reporters asked her the same question for years afterward. What did she want people to remember about her story? Her answer never changed. "The truth doesn't need power to survive," she would say, her mother's photograph still safe in her pocket. "It only needs someone willing to carry it." And somewhere in the stars, the other survivors of the family watched their daughter on the screens and smiled. The Academy had trained leaders for 200 years, but it had never trained one quite like